The assignment announcement landed like a thunderclap in the lecture hall. Your midterm project, he said, his tone even but eyes glinting, will be done in pairs. You will analyze contrasting perspectives on the same test, present both arguments and defend them. The teams will be assigned a collective grand rose. Students hated being forced into pairs. Vine, however, straightened in her chair. Ready, she only had to survive a semester. After all, paired with any of her classmates, she could handle it. But when Jungkook began reading names, her confidence faltered. Shalma and he buzzed, eyes flicking up, lingering on her for a fraction of a second. Sing. Relief flooded her chest. She wasn't paired with. And finally, he continued. Since one student dropped the course, I will personally be supervising one group to maintain balance. That group will be. His eyes returned to hers, and the faintest curve tugged at his lips. Miss Sharma. The air in the hall seemed to thin. Her classmates erupted in whispers. Lucky, unlucky, more like imagining doing a project with him. Vine's stomach dropped. Of course, fate wasn't done mocking her. They met in the library the next afternoon. Vine slammed her notebook on the table. Let's get this over with. Shingo glanced at her coldly. You sound thrilled. Trust me, I'm not. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Then let's make a deal. We will focus only on the project. No arguments, no distractions. She narrowed her eyes. You mean no debates where you try to humiliate me? His lips twitched. Only if you can't resist provoking me. Her chest tightened, infuriated man, always turning her words back at her. But she nodded stiffly. Fine, project only. For the first half hour, they worked in tense silence. She scribbled notes furiously, refusing to look at him. He occasionally leaned over, correcting her references, his sleeve brushing hers, each time her pulse spiked. But she told herself it was irritation. At one point, she reached for a book just as he did. Their fingers grazed. She snatched her hand back like it burned. Don't howl. I wasn't. His voice was maddeningly calm. Maybe you just noticed me too much. Her cheeks flared hot. I do not. His hum was low, but intimidating. If you say so. An hour later, frustration boiled over. You can't just call this pragmatic. Vine snapped, slamming her pen down. He betrayed everyone depending on him. Jungkook's eyes narrowed. For once, he didn't reply with his casual calmness. His voice was sharper, more intense. Sometimes walking away is survival. Not every choice is black and white, Miss Sharma. Not everyone has the luxury of defiance. Her breath caught. There was something raw in his tone, too raw for a classroom debate. Something personal. She blinked at him, startled. He realized it too, because his jaw tightened, his composure snapping back like a shield. Let's stay on the topic, he said quietly, turning to his notes. But the moment hung between them, heavy and unspoken. For the first time, she saw not just a smug professor, but a man with shadows behind his calm exterior, and against her will, he looked too calm. He lost track of time. The library lights dimmed, signaling closing hours. Vine stretched, rubbing her neck. We should stop. Jungkook stacked the books neatly. We made progress. You argue passionately. I will give you that. Her brows rose. Was that a compliment? His lips curved faintly. Don't let it go to your head. Something shifted in the air, softer, quieter. She found herself staring at him, at the way the light traced his jaw, at the faint tiredness in his eyes. Not the arrogant professor, not the infuriating fiancé her parents chose. Just a man sitting across from her. It unsettled her more than any argument. She shoved her notebook into her bag. See you tomorrow. As she walked away, she heard him murmur, almost too soft to catch. You always run when it gets real. Her steps faltered, heart prickled down her spine. She didn't look back. Skip to trip. The bus rattled down the narrow road, packed with chatter, laughter, and restless energy. The annual college trip was usually a highlight of the semester, a chance for students to escape assignments, breathe fresh air, and let the mountains strip away their stress. For Vine, though, this trip felt like another battlefield because, of course, Jungkook was coming along as one of the supervising faculty. Her friends tease her relentlessly. Better behave or Sir will give you extra homework. Imagine sitting next to him on the bus. She rolled her eyes, but her stomach twisted as she boarded. Naturally, every seat was taken except the one beside him. Jungkook glanced up from his book as she froze in the aisle. Miss Sharma, he said evenly, though his lips curved ever so slightly, planning to stand all the way. Muffled giggles spread from her classmate. Grinding her teeth, she slid into the seat beside him, arms folded tightly. Don't talk to me. Gladly, he murmured, returning to his book. But the silence wasn't safer. Every bump in the door jolted her against his shoulder. Every shift of his arm made her hyper aware of the narrow space. When he finally closed the book, she couldn't help glancing. You read that for fun? She blurted. His brow arched. Surprising? Yes, she said bluntly. You seem to. She stopped herself. To what? He asked, tone amused. Too smug, she muttered. He chuckled softly, and for some reason, the sound made her heart lurk. Hours later, the group hiked through the hillside trail, the air sharp with pine. Vine walked with her friends, relieved to have some distance from him, until dark clouds rolled in. The rain began as a drizzle, then quickly thickened into a downpour. Students freaked out, rushing for shelter beneath trees and rocks. Vine slipped on the wet slope, her foot skidding. She braced for impact. A firm grip caught her waist. Her breath hitched. Jungkook stood there steady despite the mud, his hand anchoring her. Careful, he said, voice low. You will break your neck charging ahead like that. She pulled her hand free, heart hammering. I didn't ask you to save me. No, he said calmly, water streaming down his hair. But I wasn't going to watch you fall, my secret fiancé. Her pulse raised. She hated how sincere he sounded. The rain didn't stop, the path flooded, and the group was herded into an old wooden rush shelter at the edge of the forest. It was small, crowded, and leaking. Wine squeezed into a corner, shivering in her drenched cloth. To her horror, no Jungkook noticed. Without a word, he shrugged off his jacket, slightly damp but warmer than nothing, and wrapped it over her shoulders. She stiffened. I don't need your pity, mister. His eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. It's not pity, it's my responsibility as a soon gonna be husband. She should have refused, she should have showered back. But the warmth seeped in, and for once she stayed silent. Around them, classmates whispered, some giggled, but in that little corner of the storm, the world seemed smaller, just the two of them. The breathing in the same damp air, heart thundering in this rhythm with the rain. When the storm eased, the group began their trek back. The path was slippery, forcing everyone to move slowly. At one point, Vine stumbled again, mud splattering her leg. She cursed under her breath, trying to scrape it off. Django crouched beside her, surprising. You will only make it worse. She scolded. I can't handle mud, thank you very much. Clearly, his lips twitched, but instead of mocking, he carefully used his handkerchief to wipe the rest of it. She froze. His touch wasn't on her skin, but the closeness, the focus in his expression, made her stomach flip. When he straightened, he said nothing, just handed her the cloth. For the first time, she couldn't find words to throw back at him. Back to college. The library was nearly empty when Vine walked in. Most students had fled after the long trip, eager for their beds, but she still had work to finish for the midterm project, and unfortunately so did Janko. He was already there, seated at the long wooden table surrounded by open books. His sleeves were rolled up, his glasses perched on his nose. For once, He didn't look like the smug professor she hated. He looked human, focused, almost tired. She hesitated at the doorway, debating whether to leave, but his voice carried across the silence. "You're late, Miss Sharma." Of course, she marched over, dropping her bag with a thud. "It's having a life outside of dusty books." He looked up, amused. "And yet, here you are." They worked in silence at first, the scratching of pens and flipping of pages the only sounds. But the quiet wasn't comfortable, it was charged. Every time she looked up, she caught his eyes on her, and every time he didn't look away fast enough. Finally, she snapped her notebook shut. "Do you stare at all your students, or am I just special?" His lips curved. "You like to think you're special, won't you?" She rolled her eyes. "You're insufferable." "And yet," he said smoothly, "you still show up." Her heart skipped. She told herself it was an anchor, not the way his voice dipped lower, softer. At one point, she leaned across him to grab a reference book. The shoulders brushed, and she froze, her breath catching. He didn't move, didn't even pretend it happened. It hadn't happened. Instead, he murmured, "You are too reckless, always rushing in without thinking." She turned sharply, their face closer than any they should have been. "And you're too guarded, always hiding behind calm words and cold logic." His eyes flickered. For a second, she thought she saw something raw there again. Something that echoed and stormed in him she glimpsed before. The tension snapped when he leaned back, smirking faintly. "Maybe that's why they think we will balance together." Her cheeks burned. "They are wrong." But her voice didn't sound convincing, not even to herself. Hours slipped by. By the time the librarian announced closing time, the campus was already quiet. They gathered their books, walking side by side down the dim corridor. Halfway to the gate, the lights flickered from a power cut, plunging them into semi-darkness. Vine started, nearly tripping. Jungkook's hand shot out, steadying her by the waist. For a moment neither moved. The world was silent but for their breathing. She felt his hand warm against her, his gaze fixed on her face, then to her lips. Her lips parted, her heart thundering. He leaned in towards her slowly. The lips were inches apart from touching each other. If either of them leaned a fraction closer, the lights buzzed back on. She jerked away, heat flooding her cheeks. "Don't touch me." His expression was unreadable, but his voice was steady, too steady. "You look like you needed saving again." She spun on her heel and stormed off, furious at him, furious at herself, because in that single heartbeat of darkness she hadn't wanted to pull away. That night in her room, she replayed the moment again and again. The way he had looked at her, the way the air had crackled, heavy and dangerous. A pillow muffled her groan. This couldn't be happening. She wasn't supposed to feel anything but irritation toward him, and yet her lips tingled with the ghost of something that never happened. Next day, Vine sat stiffly in the lecture hall, staring at the notebook in front of her without really seeing it. The faint hum of the ceiling fan mixed with the low murmur of students settling into their seats. She didn't want to look up because she knew the moment she did she would see him. She is acting strangely since yesterday. At the front of the class, acting as if nothing had changed, as if he hadn't become the center of her chaos. "Good morning," his voice filled the room. Calm, controlled, infuriatingly steady. Her voice, her fingers tightened around her pen. Jungkook began the lecture like any other day, writing formulas on the board, explaining concepts with the effortless authority that made students listen without question. But Vine couldn't focus. Every word from his mouth felt like a personal challenge, and his lips, oh, how dare he stand there so composed? How dare he act like their lives were entangled together? Her thoughts tangled her. Until Miss Sharma, her head snapped up. The entire class turned to look at her. Jungkook stood at the board, chalk in hand, watching her with an unreadable expression. "Would you like to share the answer?" Hate rushed to her face. She hadn't heard the question. Of course he noticed. Maybe if you were paying attention, he added calmly, you would know the answer. A few students chuckled. Her pride flared instantly. Maybe if you explained it properly, she shot back. People wouldn't get confused. The room went silent. No one spoke to professors like that. But Jungkook simply tilted his head slightly, studying her. Interesting argument, he said slowly, but blaming the teacher is rarely the solution for not paying attention. Their eyes locked. And something sharp flickered between them, a silent war. Finally, he turned back to the board. See me after class. The last student left the classroom. Vine lingered deliberately, packing her bag slowly. She wasn't nervous. No, she was furious. The door clicked shut behind the last student. Jungkook leaned against the desk, arm folded. Do you always challenge professors in class? He asked. Only the ones who deserve it. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Careful, he said quietly. Your attitude might get you into trouble. Are you threatening me? Not at all. He stepped closer. I'm warning you. Her pulse skipped. He was closer than she expected. Too close. You think I'm scared of you? She asked. Should you be? Their eyes held. The air between them felt different when no one else was around, quieter, charged. Vine forced herself to step back. You wanted to see me, she said quickly. His expression shifted back to professional calm. Yes. She handed her a paper, your assignment. She glanced down, a perfect score, her eyebrows lifted. You just humiliated me in front of the class. You humiliated yourself by not paying attention. Her jaw tightened. You could have failed me. Jungkook's gaze softened slightly. You earned the grade. The sincerity in his voice surprised her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Vine grabbed the paper and turned toward the door. Try paying attention next time, he added quietly. She buzzed. Try not being insufferable next time. And she left, but the faint smile on his face lingered long after the door closed. By the end of the week, the whispers began. Did you hear? Professor Jungkook and Vine. I think the families know each other. Maybe that's why she gets special treatment. Vine rolled her eyes for the first time after hearing it. But rumors had a way of growing, especially on a college campus, especially when people noticed how often Jungkook called on her in class, or how their arguments sounded suspiciously flirting, and someone else noticed too. He sung. He leaned against her desk one afternoon in the library. You know, he said casually, people are starting to talk. People always talk. About you and Jungkook, she froze. There's nothing to talk about. Hee-sung shrugged. Maybe. His eyes glinted, but it looks interesting from the outside. Before she could respond, a shadow fell across the table. Jungkook. His expression was perfectly calm. Mr. Hee-sung, he straightened immediately. Yes, sir. If you have time to socialize, he said coolly. You probably have time to finish the assignment I asked for yesterday. Hee-sung muttered something under his breath and walked away. Wine glared at Jungkook. You didn't have to do that. He was distracting you. I can't handle distractions, can you? Their eyes met again, and once more the air between them tightened. That evening the sky darkened suddenly. Heavy rain began pounding against the campus buildings. Most students rushed home, but Vine stayed in the library, finishing a project. When she finally left, the corridors were almost empty and the rain was worse than before. She sighed and ran toward the faculty wing, hoping to wait until it slowed. The nearest room with light inside, Jungkook's office. She hesitated, then knocked. Come in. She opened the door. Jungkook looked up from his desk, surprised. Miss Sharma. It's raining, she said awkwardly. I noticed. She stepped inside. Thunder echoed outside. For a moment they simply looked at each other, alone. In a small office with the storm trapping them inside. You can wait here until the rain stops, Jungkook said finally. Vine nodded. Minutes passed in silence. The tension grew unbearable. Why do you keep staring at me? She snapped suddenly. I'm not. You are. He leaned back in his chair. Maybe I'm wondering why you hate me so much. Her laugh was sharp. You want a list? He stood slowly. You're angry about the marriage. You think? He stepped closer. But that wasn't my decision. Her voice trembled with frustration. You could have refused. So could you. They were standing very close now. The storm outside roared louder. You drive me insane, she muttered. Likewise. The words slipped out before either of them could stop them. Their eyes locked. Something shifted. Wine tried to step away, but his hand caught her wrist. Not rough, just enough to stop her. Jungkook, she didn't finish because suddenly his restraint cracked. He pulled her closer and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it was weeks of tension exploding all at once. Vine's mind screamed that this was wrong, that he was her professor, that they hated each other, but her heart refused to listen. For one dizzy moment, she kissed him back. Then reality crashed in. She pulled away, both of them breathing hard. The silence afterward was deafening. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair. That shouldn't have happened. Vine nodded quickly. Yes, exactly. But neither of them moved farther away, and neither of them could forget the way it felt. Outside, the rain continued pouring, as if the storm inside the office had only just begun. The kiss changed everything and nothing. The next morning, Vine walked in the college, feeling like every pair of eyes could somehow see what had happened in the small office that night before. She hated it, she hated the memory of it. She hated the way her heart betrayed her. Every time she remembered how his hand had tightened on her wrist before pulling her closer, and she hated the fact that she had kissed him back. Her fingers clenched around the strap of her bag as she walked into the lecture hall. Students were chatting loudly, the room buzzing with the usual morning chaos. Then the door opened, Jungkook walked in, the entire room went quiet for a second out of habit. He placed his notes on the desk, his expression calm and unreadable, completely normal, completely professional, as if nothing had happened between them. Vine felt something twist in her chest. Good, she told herself angrily, that's how it should be. Jungkook began the lecture without ever looking at her, not once, not when she entered. Not when she sat in the front row like she always did. Not even when he asked the questions and the entire class turned toward her automatically. He avoided her completely and somehow that annoyed her more than anything else. By the time the class ended, her frustration was boiling. Students began filling out of the table. She grabbed her bag and stormed toward the door. Miss Sharma, his voice stopped her instantly. She turned slowly. Jungkook stood beside the desk, watching her. The classroom emptied quickly. The tension between them obvious even to passing students. When the last student left, Vine crossed her arms. So you now remember I exist. His jaw tightened slightly. We shouldn't repeat what happened next day. She laughed sharply. Oh, don't worry. I have no intention of kissing you again. Something flickered in his eyes, but he said nothing. Instead, he simply replied calmly, Good. That one word irritated her more than anything else. She grabbed her bag and walked out, but the storm between them was far from over. College gossip moved faster than wildfire. By the end of the week, whispers had started. Did you see her leave the faculty wing yesterday evening? I hear Professor Jungkook stayed late too. They were in his office for almost an hour. Vine heard the murmurs everywhere, in the corridors, in the cafeteria, even in the library. She tried to ignore it, but someone else did it. His son. He slid into the chair across from her in the library with a lazy grin. You know, he said casually, people are starting to think something interesting is going on between you and Professor Jungkook. Vi looked up sharply. Oh god, I wish Nisha was here. Nisha had transferred to another college due to family emergency. The Isam shrugged. Maybe he leaned forward slightly. But it's strange, right? You two always arguing in class, staying back after lectures. Her patient snapped. Do you have something better to do than gossip? Before Hasten could reply, a shadow fell across the table. Both of them looked up. Jungkook, his expression was calm. But his eyes were cold. Mr. Heesung, he called evenly. Unless you have completed the assignment due tomorrow, I suggest you focus on your work. Heesung leaned back. Yes, sir, but his smirk remained. When Jungkook walked away, Heesung chuckled quietly. See, he said softly, that right there is why people are talking. Vine slammed her notebook shut. She was beginning to realize something dangerous. The more she tried to ignore Jungkook, the more the entire college noticed them. The real explosion happened 2 weeks later. At dinner, Vine had barely sat down when her father cleared his thought. There is something important we need to discuss. Her stomach tightened instantly. Her mother looked unusually excited. We have decided to officially announce your engagement next week. The words felt like a punch. What? Her father's voice was firm. The rumors about you and Jungkook are spreading. The best way to silence them is to make the truth public. Vine's tears scrapped loudly as she stood up. I never agreed to this marriage. Her father's expression hardened. You will. This is my life, and we are trying to protect it. She looked at her mother desperately, but her mother only said gently, you will understand one day. Wine felt like the walls were closing in. She pushed away from the table and ran upstairs. Her hands trembled as she slammed the door shut behind her. They were trapping her, forcing her into a marriage she never wanted, with a man she fought with every single day. And suddenly one thought became crystal clear. I need to get out. Midnight before engagement, the house was silent. Vine quietly sipped her bag, and she hadn't packed much, just enough to leave. She scribbled in a short note and left it on her desk. I am sorry, I can't do this. Her heart pounded as she slipped out of the house. The night air was cold as she walked toward the bus station. Every step felt unreal, but also strangely freeing. For the first time since the nightmare began, she was making her own decision. 20 minutes later, she finally reached the station and froze because someone was standing near the entrance. Jungkook. He looked as if he had been waiting for hours. Her anger flared instantly. Move. He didn't. Where are you going? He asked quietly. That's none of your business. His eyes dropped to the bag in her hand. You are running away. Congratulations, Professor. You're observant. She tried to walk past him. He caught her wrist. Vine, let me go. I can't. Her eyes blazed with fury. You can't get to stop me. I'm not stopping you. Then why are you here? For the first time, his calm expression crackled. Because you're running away. Won't solve problem. Her voice shook with frustration. I refused to marry someone just because her parents decided. You think I had a choice? The words stunned her. Jungkook looked away briefly before speaking again. I said no. He admitted quietly. Her anger faltered. What? I told my parents I didn't want this marriage right now. For you. And they didn't listen. The silence between them grew heavy. She saw something different in his eyes. Not arrogance, not irritation, just exhaustion. She could still walk away, she said stubbornly. I won't destroy my family for that. And I should? No, he stepped closer. I'm asking you to not destroy your future. Her chest tightened. You don't understand. Then explain. But she couldn't. Because deep down she knew something terrifying. Running away wouldn't fix anything. It would only ruin everything she had worked for. Her education, her life, her family. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Jungkook noticed. He didn't say I told you so. Instead, he simply said softly, come back. For a long moment she stared at him. Then slowly she turned toward the road and walked back. Next day, their engagement ceremony took place. The house was full of relatives, laughter and decorations. Vine felt completely detached from it. She stood beside Jungkook while photographers snapped pictures. Smile, someone whispered. She forced one. Jungkook stood beside her quietly. Neither of them spoke much, but every now and then their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. When the time came to exchange rings, the room fell silent. Jungkook gently took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady for a moment. The memory of the night in his office flashed through her mind. The storm, the kiss, her pulse quickened. She slid her ring into her finger. She did the same. The room erupted in applause. But as they stood there together, Vine realized something unsettling. She had tried to run, tried to fight, tried to escape, and yet somehow she was still standing here, engaged to the one man who drove her absolutely insane. And the worst part, a small confusing part of her heart wasn't entirely sure she hated it anymore. The wedding day. The wedding day arrived faster than Vine expected, too fast. The phone the house burst with relatives, decorations, and loud conversations. Every room smelled of flowers and incense. Her mother rushed around making sure everything was perfect, but Vine felt strangely disconnected from it all. She sat in front of the mirror while the makeup artist adjusted the jewelry around her neck. "You look beautiful," someone said behind her. She didn't answer. Her reflection stared back at her like a stranger dressed as a bride for a life she never planned. Outside, the wedding hall was already filling with guests, and somewhere in the crowd, Jungkook was waiting. Across the hall, Jungkook stood beside his parents. He wore the traditional sherwani with a quiet elegance, greeting relatives politely as they approached him, but his calm expression hid a storm of thoughts. He had spent weeks of convincing himself that this marriage was simply an obligation, a responsibility, nothing more. Then Vine had kissed him back in that office. And suddenly things had become much more complicated. Jungkook, his mother said gently. He looked up. It's time. The ceremony was about to begin. The moment Vine walked into the hall, the entire room fell silent. She looked stunning. Jungkook noticed immediately. She hated that his heart reacted the way it did. She sat beside him in front of the sacred fire, carefully avoiding eye contact. The priest began chanting. Rituals followed one after another, garlands, prayers, blessings. Then came the final revow, the moment that would officially bind them together. As Jungkook tied the sacred thread around her neck, his fingers brushed lightly against her skin. Vine's breath caught. For just a second, their eyes met. And something unfamiliar passed between them. Not anger, not hatred, something more complicated. The priest smiled. You are now husband and wife. The crowd erupted in applause, but Jungkook and Vine simply sat there quietly because both of them knew the real battle was only beginning. The first night, their new apartment was quiet when they finally arrived. Too quiet. Vine stood in the living room awkwardly, unsure what to say. Jungkook loosened his collar and placed his keys on the table. So, she said stiffly. So, he replied. The silence stretched. Finally, she crossed her arms. Just so we are clear, she said firmly, this marriage doesn't change anything, okay? His eyebrow lifted slightly. Oh, we are still the same two people who can't stand each other. A faint smirk appeared on his face. That hasn't changed, no. She glared at him. And we will stay out of each other's way. He nodded calmly. Works for me. He gestured toward the hallway. You can take the bedroom. Really? I will use the guest room. Her suspicion softened slightly. Thank you. He simply nodded and walked away. But neither of them noticed how long their eyes lingered on each other before they turned. The first few weeks of marriage were chaotic. They fought constantly over small things, over big things, over absolutely nothing. You used my mug. It was the closest one. You have your own. You have 5 mugs, mine. And you chose the one I used every morning. But somehow, despite the arguments, they began learning each other's habits. Jungkook discovered she stayed up late studying. Vine realized he drank coffee at exactly 7 a.m. every day. They started cooking dinner together occasionally, though half of the time it ended in another argument. One evening, while reaching for the same plate in the kitchen cabinet, their eyes met. Their hands brushed. They both froze. Vine pulled her hand back quickly, but neither of them spoke about the way that simple touch had made their hearts race. One afternoon at college, Vine was talking to Heesung near the campus entrance. Heesung had clearly decided not to give up. You know, he said casually. Marriage doesn't mean you can't have friends. Vine rolled her eyes. We are just talking. Exactly. He smiled. You deserve someone who actually makes you happy. Before she could reply, a familiar voice interrupted. While both of them turned, Jungkook stood a feet away. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Class started in 5 minutes, he said evenly. Heesung raised his hands jokingly. Relax, sir, I was just keeping her company. Jungkook's gaze didn't leave him. That won't be necessary. Heesung chuckled awkwardly and walked away. She turned to Jungkook immediately. What was that? What? You just chased him away like he was a stray dog. I reminded you that class was starting. You were jealous. His expression hardened instantly. I don't get jealous. She stepped closer. You absolutely do. He leaned slightly toward her, his voice dropping. You're imagining things. But something in his eyes betrayed him and mine noticed. Later that week, Vine stopped by his office to drop off an assignment, and when she turned to leave, Jungkook spoke. Wait, she looked back. What now? He stood slowly. You enjoy provoking me, don't you? She raised an eyebrow. You enjoy pretending you don't care. The tension between them grew thicker with every second. You were flirting with him, he said quietly. I was talking. You knew it would annoy me. Maybe. He took a step closer. And maybe I wanted to see your reaction. Now they stood only inches apart. You're playing a dangerous game, he said softly. She tilted her head. Are you going to stop me? For a moment, Jungkook looked like he was losing control again, just like that night in the office during the storm. His hand moved slightly toward her. Then he stopped himself. He stepped back suddenly. This is a bad idea. She watched him carefully, and for the first time since their marriage, she realized something important. He wasn't indifferent, he was fighting himself and losing. Marriage had not made things easier. If anything, it made everything more complicated. Vine and Jungkook continued their strange routine of fighting and silently caring about each other in ways neither of them admitted. Some days were peaceful, others were disastrous. One evening, Vine walked into the apartment and immediately noticed something strange. He was already home, and he was talking on the phone. His voice sounded softer than usual. She dropped her bag quietly and listened without meaning to. Yes, I will meet you tomorrow. At first, then she said something that made her chest tighten. No, she doesn't know. The call ended. Jungkook turned around and saw her standing there. How long have you been home? He asked. Long enough. Her voice sounded colder than she intended. He frowned slightly. What's wrong? Nothing. She walked past him toward the kitchen, but something unfamiliar twisted in his chest. Jealousy? Why feeling jealousy? Am I in love with him? And she hated it. The next day at college, Vine saw her, a woman standing outside Jungkook's office. She was beautiful, confident, and clearly familiar with him. When Jungkook arrived, the woman smiled brightly. Jungkook, Vine froze. Jungkook looked surprised. Dia, they hugged. Vine's stomach dropped. She turned away immediately, pretending she hadn't seen anything. But the image burned in her mind the entire day. That evening, he came home later than usual. Vine sat on the couch pretending to read. Busy day? She asked without looking up. Something like that. Silence filled the room. Finally, she asked a question she had been holding back. Who is Dia? Jungkook looked slightly surprised. You saw her? Hard not to. He loosened his tie and sat down. She's an old friend. Just a friend? Yes. Something about his calm answer irritating her. Then why didn't you mention her? I didn't think it mattered. Vine snapped her book shut. Of course it matters. She looked very comforted hugging my husband. Jungkook blinked. Then slowly a smile appeared. You are jealous. Her face turned red instantly. I'm not. You absolutely are. I'm annoyed because you're jealous, because you're impossible. She stormed toward the bedroom. Jungkook leaned back on the couch, still smiling slightly, but deep down he felt something dangerous too, because hearing jealousy in her voice had affected him more than he expected. 2 weeks later, everything exploded. The argument started over something small, but it quickly became something much bigger. You never tell me anything, Mine shouted, and you assume the worst about everything because you hide things. I don't hide things. You met that woman again. She is helping with a research project. Oh, please. Her frustration had begun building for weeks. You always act like this marriage means nothing. He stared at her. That's not true. Then prove it. Silence filled the room. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, and then Vine had something she instantly regretted. Maybe we should never have gotten married. The words hit him harder than she expected. His expression changed instantly, cold, hard. If that's how you feel, he said quietly, then maybe you're right. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, and for the first time since their marriage, Mind felt genuine fear. Jungkook left the apartment that night. Hours passed. Vine sat alone in the living room, replaying the argument over and over. The silence felt unbearable. She walked into the kitchen. The mug he used every morning sat on the counter. His jacket hung over the chair. Every small detail reminded of him. And suddenly she realized something terrifying. She didn't want him to leave. She loved him. All their fights, all their arguments, and the tension between them, it had become part of her life, part of her heart. Tears filled her eyes as the realization finally hit. She really loved him, and she had been too stubborn to admit it. It was almost midnight when the door finally opened. Jungkook walked inside quietly. He looked tired, but when he saw Vine sitting on the couch waiting for him, he stopped. Neither of them spoke for a moment, then he stood up slowly. Jungkook, he looked at her cautiously. Yes, her heart pounded. I was wrong. He didn't move. I shouldn't have said those things. Silence stretched between them. Then she took a deep breath. I was angry because I care. His eyes darkened slightly. Care? She stepped closer. Yes, another step. And because I was jealous, his breath slowed. Jealous of anyone who gets your attention. She stopped only inches away from him now. The tension between them was familiar but different, softer, more honest. I tried to hate you, she admitted quietly, and I tried to ignore you. Jungkook's voice was low, and she looked directly into his eyes. I failed. For a moment, he simply stared at her, then something in his expression finally broke. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. This time, there was no hesitation. No anger, just relief. Their kiss was slow at first, then deeper, months of tension finally breaking. When they pulled apart, Vine rested her forehead against his chest. I fell in love with you at some point too, but I was afraid to admit because what if I lose you? Really? Does this mean we stop fighting? She asked softly. Jungkook laughed quietly. Probably not, she smiled, but we love each other now. He tilted her chin up gently. Yes, and this time when he kissed her, neither of them held back.